Hello, I'm Dr. Leonard Matheson. I'm a rehabilitation psychologist.
Welcome to Decoding the DCAT 2, Scoring and Interpretation Framework for the Occupational Therapist. My goal in this brief video is to help you safely transition our clients back into the competitive labor market. But to do that, we need safe, reliable, and defensible data to describe the client's work capacity. I'm going to walk you through exactly how to use the DCAT 2 to translate your stopwatch times and behavioral observations into a clear, standardized language that employers and vocational experts understand. Let's get started. Let's begin our module by looking at what we call the dual engine of assessment. When you are administering the DCAT 2, you are actually gathering two completely different but equally important types of information simultaneously. On the left side of your screen, you see objective productivity. This is all about the stopwatch. It tells us how fast and how accurate the client is compared to the competitive labor market. It gives us our time to completion, our percentile rankings, and connects us to normative data. But the stopwatch alone isn't enough. On the right side, we have behavioral employability. This is where your clinical eye comes in. We are looking for safe, dependable performance and the ability to execute tasks independently under varying occupational demands. We are asking, what accommodations does this client need to safely sustain their performance? Remember, a defensible clinical opinion requires both the exact objective measurement of the impairment and the behavioral diagnosis of their functional capacity. Moving to the next slide, let's break down exactly how we score this dual engine. For productivity performance, the metrics, your data source is the duration measured in total seconds. You interpret this raw time by translating it into a 5th to 95th percentile ranking to compare your client against healthy, employed workers. For employability rating, the observation, your data source is your behavioral observation of the client while they work. You interpret these observations by assigning an employability rating scale, or ERS score. You will use the minimum necessary accommodation guidelines as your reference. A simple way to remember this distinction is at the bottom of the slide. Productivity measures the output, while employability measures the support required to achieve that output. Now, let's talk about the chairs themselves. When comparing a client to the employed labor market, you must use the baby bear chair data to establish the baseline. Why? Because of three key principles. First, the invariant order. During our normative data collection, testing always began with the baby bear chair. Second, it provides unbiased data. The baby bear chair is the only de novo trial, meaning it is completely unbiased by any practice effect. It's their very first time seeing the task. Third, while you can use the mama and papa chairs to track a client's longitudinal progress over the course of therapy, only the baby bear chair establishes the true initial normative baseline. On this slide, we introduce discrepancy analysis. Normative data dictates that there should be an expected proportional relationship between how well a client places parts and how well they assemble them. When there is a significant deviation, it signals a clinical issue we need to investigate. Look at quadrant A, high placement but low assembly. If a client is fast at placing parts but struggles to build the chair, this suggests executive function problems, such as difficulty with multitasking or sequencing, or specific manual dexterity issues when applying force. Now look at quadrant B, low placement but high assembly. This is highly unusual. It's a red flag for erratic effort, a severe misunderstanding of the initial instructions, or an extreme practice effect. When assembly fails, we apply our O-net diagnostic lenses. Is it a problem with visualization, the inability to imagine spatial rearrangement? Is it problem sensitivity, failing to notice when the assembly is going wrong? Or is it selective attention, getting distracted during the task. This brings us to one of our most important tools, the LTFE, or less than full effort filter. How do we know the client is really trying? We use a simple 3-step process. Step 1. Administer a retest of the parts placement subtest after a 2-hour delay. Step 2. Apply the 10% rule. Did their raw score improve by 10% or more? If yes, full effort is confirmed because proportional improvement matches normative expectations and you can proceed with standard interpretation. If no, LTFE is suspected. This moves us to step 3, clinical action. You must first investigate plausible physical explanations, like fatigue or a pain flare-up. If there's no physical explanation, you have to consider boredom, depression, or willful non-cooperation. At this point, it is time to initiate the talk with your client to reestablish motivation before proceeding. Once we have valid data, we score employability using the ERS. A score of 3.70 or higher is competitive, meaning no accommodations are required and their productivity matches peers. 3.20 to 3.69 is self-managed. The client manages their own accommodations while keeping productivity up. 2.30 to 3.19 is coached, where they require occasional physical or verbal guidance. 1.00 to 2.29 is active supervision, meaning they require ongoing intervention and their productivity drops below peers. Anything below 1.00 is unable, meaning they are currently unemployable in this capacity. Your core rule here is vital. Always grade based on the minimum necessary intervention. You should only provide enough support to prevent the client from getting stuck and to maintain their safety. Now, when we move from work sample tests to situational assessments, we make a major interpretive shift. We shift from highly standardized productivity measurement to the naturalistic observation of cognitive overload and executive function. We introduce distractors like telephone messages while they assemble the chair. There are 3 key scoring elements for a situational assessment. First, duration, which measures time to completion under cognitive load. Second, the ERS score, which gauges their ability to maintain safety and emotional regulation while multitasking. And third, instructional aids. You must explicitly track which aids the client prefers under stress. Do they rely on the written assembly manual, or do they look at the physical assembled model? This is critical for debriefing and recommending workplace accommodations. Finally, we must write our report. This slide shows the work sample blueprint. Your narrative should directly plug in the raw stopwatch data and your DCAT 2 professional manual appendix cross-references. For example, her score of 49 seconds on the placement test resulted in a 50th percentile ranking. Notice the normative context box on the right? You must always specify the normative reference group you are using. Are you comparing them to all workers or using gender-specific data? Be explicit in your writing. For the situational assessment report, the blueprint shifts slightly. First, you must explicitly name the O-net deficits. As you can see in the example, we don't just say the client was confused. We state they have significant problems with cognitive processing speed and the ability to identify errors. Next, you must provide the ERS translation. You state the exact ERS level and translate it directly into accommodation language. In the example, we write that the client is in the accommodated employment range, coached, and requires personnel accommodations in the workplace. This gives employers clear, actionable guidance. To summarize our framework, we follow 4 chronological steps. Step 1. Capture raw signals, the stopwatch times and observed behaviors. Step 2. Apply diagnostic lenses using the discrepancy matrix and the LTFE 10% filter to ensure validity. Step 3. Establish the clinical picture, determining percentile rankings and ERS accommodation levels. And Step 4. Job matching insights, writing the narrative report that officially bridges the clinic to the worksite. Keep this core philosophy in mind as you leave today. The DCAT-2 doesn't just measure a deficit, it maps the precise accommodations required for a successful return to work. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to hearing from you. Remember, in our chosen careers, we always want to recognize and develop the value in each of us. That's our professional motto.